In this video, we talk about a board game that you probably have not heard of. It's called Octagone by Luca Poletti. It is an Italian game. It is one of those self-produced games that you can tell at a glance are a true labor of love, because so much love went into the production, into the materials, and the game, production-wise, looks pretty impressive. Then, of course, you look at the game, you look at the website of the designer, and you wonder how aware they are of the changes that have happened in board game culture in the last 20 years, and you wonder. Now, just look at the bag that it comes with. It's made of this thick fabric. It has this like leather or leather-like tag here on the back. This Velcro clip with a wooden decoration around, really impressive. The board also looks really nice. It's a game that you can play with children. I did play it with one of my daughters, the 8-year-old. I had to pay her $1 because she didn't want to play with me after I explained the game. It's a game you can play with children, so I don't really know why they had to have a beer here, because that alone I think will turn off some people from playing it with children. But this is the board of the game. Then you have this bag here, and you have these discs. Like, disc is the word. They have these octagonal tokens of different colors. You put them in the bag, and then you shuffle them, and then you draw them randomly. Now, I don't know if you notice, the bag is see-through, so you better keep your eyes closed when you draw them randomly, because each player should have a combination of tokens randomly assigned. The game is mainly for 2 players. It can be played by 4 players in teams, but it's mainly really a 2-player game. And it's a pretty classic positional game. The idea is that players will alternate turns placing tokens on the board, and they continue to do so until they cannot place any more tokens on the board. And when that happens, the player who's left with the fewest tokens in the initial supply wins the game. That's the general idea. So players will alternate. So players will receive a pool of colored octagons at the beginning of the game. Each player also receives a supply of wild tokens. They are these black tokens that are wild. This is the idea. When it's your turn, you place down a token on the board. The token has to match the color of the space in which you're placing it. When you place down a token, you also choose the position of the arrow. Each token is an arrow. The position also indicates where the next game piece needs to be put down. So now my opponent needs to place down a game piece there. So that means it has to be either blue or a wild. When you put down a token, then again, the next piece has to be in the closest available space. In that case, the arrow is pointing to an empty space, so that is the closest. If I put it this way, now the arrow is pointing that way, and the closest available space is that one. And so maybe then we go this, and now the arrow is pointing there, so the next needs to be placed there. But again, if the arrow is pointing there, then the next available space is this one. So now you're mandated to put down a blue or a wild. Again, closest possible space. You can also put down a wild that would fit in any space. And also when you put down a wild, however, the trick, the plot twist, is that the next token is not placed in the closest space, so not there, but in the furthest space. So now the target space for the next token is that one. The rule book is a bit ambiguous about what the furthest place means, at least in my opinion, because if this were the situation, for example, is the furthest still that one jumping intervening pieces, or is it that one? There's also another element. You may notice these arrows here, because that means you have to imagine that the board, so like on as a sphere, you have to imagine that the board wraps around. So from there, if the arrow is pointing there, it is pointing to this blue here, and if, say, you put a red one here with the arrow pointing down, see, there is a red arrow going down because it wraps all the way around, and so the next space would be that one. So the strategy is pretty simple. You're just gonna put arrows to point towards colors of which you have a lot, and the opponent doesn't have a lot. The opponent must put down a piece if they can at all, so that's how you get them to burn their wild. Speaking about the wild ambiguity, now if I put a wild with an arrow facing that way, which is the furthest? Does it wrap all the way around here and goes back in, next to the butt of that one? Because that's the furthest. So the idea what is the furthest exactly is underexplained. But my daughter and I simply said that when you play a wild, it does not wrap around. So that would be an illegal position, because you have to place an arrow where there's an empty space. So there'll be an illegal position, and it doesn't wrap around, and it doesn't jump things. So we adjudicated that the next space where you need to place a game piece is there. And so that's how it works pretty much. Now we're gonna place an arrow there, and so the next space would be that one. And now it wraps around, so the next space would be the green one up there, and from there we go to a pink, and so on and so forth. And my opponent, for example, now doesn't have any wild to put there, doesn't have any pink, and I have a ton of pink. That's why they don't have them, because I have a ton. And so I'm just gonna unload all of my pink, which ultimately seems to be the dominant strategy. You get the opponent to burn all of theirs and to go towards a column where you have a lot. When you're there, there's no reason for you not to unload all of your color until maybe you don't have any more, and then you try to unload into another column, and maybe you have a lot of green also. And so my opponent just sitting there and looking at me as I do just this. And this, my friends, is how you play Octagone. Keep playing, alternating placements until there are no legal moves available anymore, and at the point the player with the fewest tokens in their supply wins the game. It also happened, actually, that we had a case where a player had put down all of their tokens, and there were still legal moves, and we adjudicated that also to be victory, although that's not exactly how it's written in the rulebook. As my daughter Louisa said after playing Octagone, it's not a bad game, it's just a little boring. Because it's just bland, it's just too obvious. Again, it feels like from somebody who may not have been fully aware of the renaissance and revolution in board gaming that we have had. They start from classic games like checkers, and they add something and they put a spin around it, but the result turns out to be a little less engaging than classic games like checkers. I think I'd prefer to play checkers than Octagone, and just doesn't hold up with the standards of gaming that we have these days. It just feels a little too bland. The problem is, it looks like the next best move is pretty obvious all the time. I will go and put my arrows pointing towards colors of which I have a lot, and you don't have a lot, which is also obvious. If I have a lot, I don't even need to guess. I know you don't have much. And I'll try to do that.
and as soon as there's a column where I have a lot and you cannot respond, I'll just dump them all there. And also from the point of view of the pacing of the game, the interaction, it's just kind of annoying. The one player achieves that and they just put down one and you pass, I put down another piece and you pass, I put down another piece and you pass, I put down another piece and you pass. It's just not fun to sit there while the opponent is filling up an entire column. Even as I do it, I feel like it just feels a little bit dull. And if I do it again, that again is pretty, even if I win, is not that exciting. So I played the game with my 8-year-old daughter. I played it by myself because the daughter got tired and she didn't want to play it anymore. And I just was not impressed. It just feels a little too bland. It just is missing something to really make it exciting and captivating, something to make those decisions a little more dilemmatic, a little more to feel that there's more consequence to those decisions. I feel that once you assign the initial game pieces, you could probably solve it. You could probably find the ideal strategy for both sides. So Octagone, not a great game. That's all I have to say about it. Truly not a great game.